to this meeting of the Education Executive. We have apologies from our convener, Councillor Goldie, and in those circumstances it's a matter for the meeting to appoint a convener for the duration of the meeting. So I simply ask for nominations from the floor for a convener for the purpose of this meeting.
Chair, I'm happy to nominate the Leader of the Council, Councillor Nico John.
If there are any further nominations, in that case it will be necessary to go to a division, and the normal process for that is that we simply read through the names, and if you simply indicate whether you vote is for Councillor Bissett or for Councillor Nico John. Councillor Alexander.
Councillor Nico John.
Councillor Bissett.
Michelle.
Councillor Colley.
Councillor Nico John.
Councillor Coons.
Councillor Bissett.
Councillor Flynn.
Abstain.
Councillor Harris.
Abstain.
Councillor McHugh.
Councillor Nico John.
Councillor Nico John.
Councillor Nico John.
Councillor Murtaugh.
Councillor Nico John.
Councillor Nimmo.
Councillor Bassett.
And Councillor Clark. And in relation to the two religious representatives, this not being a matter of an educational policy, we wouldn't vote on this matter. Accordingly, there are 5 votes for Councillor Nico John. There are 3 votes for Councillor Bissett. Councillor Nico John is duly appointed as the convener for this meeting.
Good morning everybody and welcome to this morning's Education Executive. We've already done the apologies, but do we have any declarations or omissions?
And I should add that there's one further apology, which is from Mrs Harkins and the religious representatives.
Thank you. Move to item 3, the minute of the meeting of the Education Centre on the 4th of September 15 to 18. Mr Mayor, you've got something you want to provide an update on?
Just in terms of item 395 on page 16 within the rolling action log, there was a report to the last meeting of the Education Executive on the Forth Valley and West Lothian Improvement Collaborative, and at that meeting I indicated that coincident with us submitting our Phase 2 plan, we had also submitted a bid to the Scottish Government for funding for the Regional Improvement Collaborative. And just to update the committee that I received notification on Friday of last week that we will receive on the basis of the collaborative funding of £900,000, and I'll provide further details of how that money will be expended when we bring our progress report to the committee in January.
Okay, thank you. That's some good news. Some money into the collaborative that will hopefully allow some work to happen amongst the 4 authorities to the benefits of all our staff and of their children. I'm sure we all welcome that. Thanks, Anna.
Well, yeah, just a question in relation to item 377, the funding and the key outcomes. States in the paperwork that this was published this year, bearing in mind we're in November already, when is this likely to be coming forward from the government?
Right.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to say that the report on the findings has not yet been published by the Scottish Government. All the Scottish Government have published thus far in 2018 is the response to the consultation document itself. We were told the final analysis of it and the way forward would be published in 2018. At this point in time, I don't know if it will be. I've not been told, but we expect it to be published fairly soon, given the response to the consultation was published in February of this year. So as soon as it is published, we'll do as we say, bring a report to the executive to give them the main and the salient points from any final document.
No other questions in relation to the action log? Okay, can we move down to the term financial plan in corporate schools? If members remember, the executive agreed a 5-year medium-term financial plan, and this is one of the strands of work coming from that. Mr. Neil, do you want to outline?
Thanks, Convener. The report in front of you is seeking to take forward the implementation of the Council's 5-year medium-term financial plan. The Executive agreed in September broad principles of that plan, which included the allocation of specific savings targets for the 3 directorates within Falkirk Council. The table, paragraph 3.1, is a lift from the report to the Executive in September in terms of the targets that have been set. The principle deployed was to after some mitigation given for expenditure that was non-influenceable, what Corporate Finance and the Executive agreed was that there would be a proportionate saving from across the 3 different directorates as set out in that table, and Children's Services have been given a target of 5.8 million over the course of the next 5 years, indeed I should be clear, in each and every one of the next 5 years, totaling £29 million of the then estimated £60 million budget gap. So the report before you today is seeking to extend that strategic approach, whereby what we're inviting the Education Executive to do is for us to task both the primary and secondary sectors to look at ways in which they would save a cash figure that is proportionate to the savings target that has been set for Children's Services by the Council. So the recommendations that are set out in paragraph 2.1, what we're proposing is that we look at the entirety of the schools funding envelope within the context of devolved schools management. We thereafter allocate a proportionate share of that saving to schools and ask schools to come forward with their actions and proposals for how these sums would be achieved, and what changes would take place on the ground, and what impact these would have. The intention thereafter would be that Children's Services would summarise the actions that are proposed by schools in order to meet their target, and that we would bring a report to the January meeting of the Education Executive for further consideration. Moving through the report, the national context for adopting this approach is set out in paragraph 3.5. Earlier reports to the Education Executive have set out the circumstances around the Education Bill of 2018 and the fact that was not progressed, but nevertheless there was a joint agreement reached between COSLA and the Scottish Government to take forward some key components of what would have been in the Education Bill. Not least of these is the whole agenda of empowering schools, local school decision making, both in terms of the management of budget, but also in terms of the curricular offer and priority setting at schools, with a strong emphasis on those priorities being set within the context of a wider school community involving the input of parents, staff, pupils and other stakeholders. So the approach that we are proposing here is that schools would be invited over the course of the coming period to be engaging with the wider school community to consider the actions and interventions that they would bring forward to generate the savings that are required, and thereafter, as I said, we would report back to the Education Executive on that. Just by way of some further information, myself and my colleagues have already met following the publication of this report. We've met with both the primary head teachers and the secondary head teachers to discuss this, and we'll be doing so again in the coming days. I have also had an initial meeting with the Joint Secretary of the LNCT on the teacher side, and it would be our intention following today's meeting to set up some wider discussion with parent council chairs in the coming weeks in terms of taking this agenda forward.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. President Hugh.
I'd like to move this report. We all understand that we're in times where finances are very difficult, and the last thing we want to be doing is cutting budgets, but it is what it is. I feel that this report then allows head teachers to consult in more depth with their teachers, with parents, with pupils, to get the whole picture of the way ahead, for them to actually look at their individual schools and see what they value and what they want to see their schools shaping into in the future. So that will allow them to have frank and honest conversations in consultation. So I've moved the report. Thank you.
Thank you. President Qualley.
Sorry, I'll second the report.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Robert, just in relation to the DSM budget, how much of that is statutory?
I'll do my best to answer that, but I might need assistance from Mr. Greenhorn. The rules, as I understand it, is that it's expected that local authorities will devolve a minimum of 85% of all expenditure on education to schools. I think many councils are achieving greater than 90% devolution, and I think we are in that category. But that's the way that DSM schemes operate, and as Gary referred to earlier, we anticipate that once the review of the fair funding is completed, there will be updated national guidance on both the totality and the extent to which that is devolved to schools. I'll ask Gary if I've got that remotely correct.
Gary.
Firstly, I can confirm that the boss has got it correct. Secondly, just to add that for statutory, what the first is papers looking at is the delegating to both primary and secondary sector a savings target against their core allocation. So their core budget allocation is the core budget they use to perform their statutory duties. So this isn't looking at anything to get additionality way of targeting children with ASN. It's looking at their core budget needs to deliver primary and secondary education from their core. So for statutory provision, we read that's their core allocation of their DSM budget that this is covering.
Okay, so if I'm right in thinking, the primary DSM budget's around about 70 million, the secondary is around about 85 million. So we can only really touch something like maybe 10-15% of that, is that right? To try and achieve any savings?
Not get teachers to look at all of it. What we're saying is that they cannot come up with anything that would impinge on the statutory duties. So there's different ways to deliver education, different ways to staff schools, and it's looking for their teachers to look at the creative ways to do it. But what we're saying is that ultimately we cannot do anything that would impinge on the statutory functions that we've got to deliver.
And what's the impact going to be on head teachers? I know they're hard pressed for time, they've got plenty to do already, and this is going to be additional pressure, additional work on them as well.
Unquestionably, there will be work involved in this activity, as indeed there is for all council officers involved with the management of budgets. We are all currently involved in looking at the budget on a day-to-day basis, both at the centre and in schools. This will be an exercise that will require a significant allocation of management time from the head teachers, but it is and always has been part of the job, and it's something that we have made clear to the head teachers that we will be supporting them with, both in terms of the generation of ideas and suggestions for what they might look at, but also Gary's team in particular supporting them with financial information analysis, pulling together spreadsheets and data research and so on, so that they can be making decisions in this form as early as possible.
Again, I might be wrong, Robert, but I don't remember a report like this primarily dealing with the DSN budget last year in the lead up to the budget. Is this something new then that you're bringing forward?
I haven't brought a report like this to the committee before, no, nor has the council taken a report to the executive, as was the case with the medium-term financial plan, which set 5-year saving targets. So it's in part in response to that council approach that has been agreed by the executive that we are required to analyse the way in which we could deliver within children's services, and the reason why the strategy that's proposed is in front of the committee today.
And this is the last point, Navina. It states in the recommendations that this will be coming back to the executive in January. Why is it not coming back to full council as part of the budget?
Similarly, the proposals that will be coming forward in general for the budget will be coming to the executive as opposed to full council. It will come back as part of the budget in February when we finally set our budget, but it will come back.
So it will be a budget decision made by the full council, not the education executive.
But it's full council that has to make a decision on the budget. This is that's one part of the overall budget considerations, and it will come back to the executive. Okay. Any other member? Sorry. Go right, sorry.
I wasn't going to come in, and it's not a question, it's just a comment. From what I see and hear here, we're basically asking head teachers would they prefer a broken arm or a broken leg. The good news is, however, we're not giving them a heart attack, but this is only the first year of 5 years worth of pain, and I think it's very important to set a marker down here that austerity, whatever you want to call it, whether it's the council of the future, whether you want to call it savings or call it a budget, it's cuts, and it's cuts to the people that matter the most. And I think we need to see quite clearly that austerity is a political choice, it is not a political necessity. And I think when we're finished all the fine talking and the lovely reports and the dressing up of them, it's the people that we serve, and it's the parents and the children that will suffer. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Michael?
I think it's obviously it's something we've got to do, and I think it's hard to do it when some of the things that we're asked to do, like class sizes and the greater needs for enhanced provision and things like that are part of what's ongoing with greater numbers requiring it. It's hard to do when all these other factors are involved. And though it's painful, I think this is a sensible approach to consult with the stakeholders here, with the teachers. So, while it's painful, I think it's something a sensible approach to do.
Thank you, Michael. David?
Yes, Navina, as has been said, it's the moment that's come into politics to cut services. It hurts very much. Not only the service users, but it hurts very much the administrators as well. And I hope that everyone around this table is hurting with regards to the financial situation we find ourselves in. But that's the situation we find ourselves in. No fault of our own, but we are where we are. And I would rather we had the full cooperation and participation of the head teachers than something that's top-down proposed. Yes, there will be additional work. There will be additional work for the directors or the managers in the other departments of Falkirk Council as well. They have been asked to take a heavy hit as well. But at least this way we have a framework. It gives us the opportunity to look very closely at the budgets and determine what our real priorities actually are. Are there issues that are ongoing that could be resolved in terms of finances? Is there the priorities that can be promoted as opposed to the priorities that are less of a priority in terms of the service delivery? So it gives us an opportunity and gives us that framework to allow the head teachers that 5 years to effectively assess their departments and schools. We hear very much what Joan has to say, and we agree very much with her. Austerity is a political choice. It was a political choice that we did not take. It was a political choice that others took on our behalf, and we are where it is, I say we are. But I've got every faith in both the abilities of our head teachers to manage our schools more efficiently, and also the ability of the Education Authority to work with the schools. And we sincerely hope, and we will certainly be doing our bit to ensure that there's maximum pressure on those who hold the real purse strings to ensure that public services such as education are properly funded. But this is a framework, it's not a budget document, and until we know we have a 5-year framework, but we have a 1-year budget settlement, and there's a contradiction there. What we have is the best intelligence that's available in relation to the anticipated expenditure over the next 5 years. But as we've seen in the past, it may not always be required in terms of some of the changes that we've been able to avoid in the past because of their impact. So yes, it's something to be wary of, but again, I do think that it gives us the opportunity as well, and that's an opportunity we intend to take.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I think sometimes, sometimes I think I should probably seek the advice of the legal advisors here about whether to declare an interest in these committees, given we have 2 children in education in Falkirk Council, and over that time, one in primary, one in secondary, I've certainly not been shy in making my views known about educational matters within their establishments, the head teachers. But that knowledge has given me the understanding that it is our head teachers within our schools who very much understand how their schools are run, where the resources need to be directed, where things can be changed, and how to manage those most effectively. Every school across this authority in every area is different, runs slightly differently, has slightly different needs. Yes, policies are common across the board, but it is our head teachers who are best placed to respond quickly to plan, and they are the ones who need to be making those decisions and advising back. And yes, bringing proposals that can work together with other schools and make the best decisions in a collegiate fashion. But I think this report is entirely the right approach to take, to set out in order for that process to begin. As the Director was saying, this is the first time this sort of report has come to Education Executive, but in terms of the share of the cuts in terms of the budget which education services will have to take, that's already been agreed at an executive, which obviously as of all parties around this table, and that we know that we have difficult decisions in every department across the board, and as Councillor Alexander, none of us want to make any of those decisions, but that is the reality that we are faced with because of the budgetary situation coming down the line, ultimately back to Westminster. I think that this approach, given that there's going to be consultation, given that there's going to be an understanding working directly with the people that will affect most, and that those sensible proposals and decisions will come back to this committee so that we can look at them in further depth before they go through the budget process. That this is a good paper and gives the time and the breadth to be able for head teachers to go and do the work they need to do. So I'm certainly very happy to support it, and I think that we'll understand what Councillor Kim is saying. It's important that we say that this is the reality, that we have education services and internal services are taking their share, education has to take its share, and this is the best way to get to the right options in order that we can choose the right things going forward that's most appropriate for that share.
Thank you, Councillor Francis.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Now, to paragraph 6 on page 23, just for ask for information, we detailed the annual target of 5.83 million for children's services, with 2.5 and 1.8 appropriately between senior and primary schools. Can we get some indication what plans children's services have for the other 1.5 million?
Councillor Patrick, for the balance of the 5.83, yeah, that essentially relates to all other areas of children's services. So children and family social work will make up a significant proportion of that. There will be savings options for community learning and development. There are savings options being developed for the central services in terms of the operation at Seawalk House, some property rationalisations and some changes within the framework and the setup of their years. So there's a basket of other things, but they don't amount to the millions that are in this paper, but they aggregate towards the 5.83 target.
Thank you. I did anticipate that we were talking about a basket of other proposals. I had hoped that perhaps some slightly more detailed indication as to the areas within the services that would be asked to accept the 1.5 million. I presume we'll receive a more detailed report on that.
I think it would be the intention that these would probably future date be presented to the budget working group.
And then on to the executive.
Back here again.
Yes, it would go to the main executive, what would be part of the paper from January. Okay, just say that nobody wants to be in this position of having to make the magnitude of changes, but what this particular framework does, it gives schools and head teachers the flexibility to look at their own particular areas and what they want to do for their own communities, and work in collaboration across their clusters to be able to actually deliver the transformation, look at maintaining services, maintaining the education process, and looking at doing it in different ways. And this gives them the tools to do that. We have to accept that the recent announcements by the Chancellor Westminster has not been favourable for Scotland, and as a result that means that there are further reductions likely to come from the Scottish Government, and we need to be able to respond to that. As a council, we have the responsibility to set a balanced budget. All of us have that responsibility, and I think there's a responsibility collectively to work together to be able to do that. This is a framework that takes us along that line, and I hope that everybody will be able to support and participate within it, and support our schools and the head teachers in taking this forward. I think it's quite clear that there's support available from the centre for the schools to be able to do this. And head teachers want to have that autonomy to be able to make some of the choices that they've not been able to make in the past. I think we need to continue that empowerment to be able to do that for them. So on that, are we happy to accept the report?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 6, and it's promoting positive relationships with public educational establishments. Which sounds much better than an anti-bullying policy, but just to make it clear to what it is that people are talking about. And it is David, Division 5, who will take this up.
Thank you, Mayor. To introduce Paul Wilcox, who's the author of the report and has been heavily involved in the process to actually produce the policy paper on behalf of the Children's Services Education Division. As convener said, the purpose of this report is to present an updated anti-bullying policy in light of the varying changes to the national guidelines, and it's been rebranded as promoting positive relationships in Falkirk's educational establishments as Appendix 1. And we seek approval from the Education Executive to progress the launch of this new policy across Falkirk Council's early years and learning centres and schools. The work has been undertaken since last April when the working group was convened, and it was to take cognizance of the new national guidance on anti-bullying in respect to all the national approach to anti-bullying for Scotland's children and young people, which we published in November 2017, and also the requirements within the supplementary guidance for recording and monitoring of incidents in schools. 3.3 highlights the key aims, and obviously what we're looking to do is to refresh and update the previous two service circulars, CS15 on prejudice-based bullying and also CS19 on anti-bullying, into one concise, coherent policy, and also to seek to make it more accessible to schools, children and young people and families and the communities in terms of the layout and structure of the particular policy, and also to kind of declutter it in terms of the lengthy text that was in the previous circulars. The Children's Services engaged in a wide range of activities to prepare the policy, and the outcomes of the policy in 3.4 looks for Children's Services then to engage with school staff to ensure that they're fully trained in understanding the implications of the new approaches. Again, it's building on approaches that are already embedded well within Falkirk Council in terms of restorative approaches, but it's looking to ensure that all of our staff, particularly those new staff that are in our schools, are aware and cited on our approach to anti-bullying and positive relationship within Falkirk Council, and also in how we actually support both the perpetrators and the victims of instances within our schools and establishments, and thereafter consistently record, report and monitor the activity to ensure that our pupils feel safe in their schools and engage in learning to the best of their ability. The considerations, the policy take into account the views and advice of a number of stakeholders across the service, from schools, pupils, parents, staff. We also engaged in a consultation process which was undertaken from the 29th of January 2018 until the 12th of March 2018, of which we received 174 responses, and those responses helped to influence and shape the discussions that were taking place with the group. The group then worked together with Respect Me, who will provide free training to Falkirk Council on the implementation of this. Their time is free, the resources are free, all that Falkirk Council will have to contribute will be the staff time, and again we'll be looking to engage staff appropriately with that training over the coming year and years as we progress through. The policy also sets out clear timelines for the work to undertake. So there's further activities required from both the central team and schools over the next period of time up until 2021, and that's detailed towards the end of the report in the end of the policy in terms of the actions that are going to be taking place during those times. And obviously from today we're looking for seeking approval. If that's granted, then we'll progress swiftly to engage with the relevant stakeholders to progress the implementation of this policy. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. Councillor McHugh.
I'm happy to remove this report, and I welcome it. Actually, you can see from this updated policy that there's been a lot of stakeholder consultation. The education have been out to in every area. I think this brings the policy in line, and I think it actually brings the anti-bullying policy to the top of the agenda of a lot of our schools. I think this policy will allow our schools to have the same approach, that over the years we have different approaches. This policy will highlight exactly the approach that every school should be having. I know as an elected member myself and others around the table that we often hear people, families get in touch with us to say that that they're unhappy with the approach they've taken and that school did it differently. This will allow us to look at the whole policy and have the same approach throughout all our schools. So I welcome that. I'd like to draw your attention to page 45 of your papers, page 12 of the actual policy, the strategic actions, and as Mr Mackay has said, that there will be training going out, and if you look at the action plan, then obviously we'll be looking at reviewing at every stage and then eventually reviewing the whole policy again in 2021. I would like to see that training year on year is highlighted. I know we do child protection training on the service days in August, a refresher. That would be a good idea to look at this policy where stakeholders again year on year and not just looking at what's being reported but actually what's been put in place and the policies actually working. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Foley. I'd like to second that and just say how much I welcome the policy. I think children and young people in our schools of all ages deserve to know that the council has a consistent approach, and as Councillor McHugh says, that parents know and they know what to expect. I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody around this table the impact of bullying on children and young people, from loss of confidence, low self-esteem, damage to their attainment, but also to the most severe where children are affected by mental health issues and self-harm and in the worst cases will commit suicide. I think it's so important that we have a consistent approach in this. Young people deserve this because the impact on bullying can go right into their adulthood and affect their life chances. So I very much welcome this and thank your team for putting this together. Ms. Linnell?
A couple of questions, Mr Convener. How do individual schools publish the number of bullying cases that they have, and how is that information made public? I mean, obviously they'll not be able to name individuals, but there must be stats available, especially I've been interested in the number of cases over the last 12 months to see if there's been any increase. The other thing with the policy, I can't see any reference to how parents actually challenge a decision on bullying. There doesn't seem to be anything in the policy.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the reporting, currently there's no set mechanism for schools to record in a consistent manner, and that's again refers to the guidance that's been given now, that there's now a requirement for schools to consistently record. And it's not just recording, it's actually recording what actions are then subsequently taken to then follow up the reporting of the incident, what's been given to the perpetrator and to the victim of it, and what's the outcome of that. So there's quite a detailed set of records going to be kept on on the system. The proposal from the Education Scotland Government is that would be fed into the current CMIS system, and again we're working with the college to develop that to ensure that appropriate training is set in place, to ensure that we've got a consistent approach from Falkirk Council, and that then will allow us to then extract data to inform further reports to the executive as required. Could you answer the second question in terms of Councillor Mills?
In terms of what parents would do, what generally we would be encouraging just now is that where there is an instance of bullying behaviour, or whether it's the one child that's been bullied or they've witnessed bullying behaviour, we have encouraged them to contact the school directly. And that's the same approach that we would be taking just now, to notify the school so that the school can then put forward those actions, can report the instance of bullying and set in motion a response to the bullying to support the victim of bullying behaviour, and obviously whoever the perpetrator is as well. So we're not deviating away from that approach of, the first thing that they have to do is contact the school, because the school needs to be made aware that the bullying is occurring. The school and the school staff are best placed to deal with the instances of bullying because they know the children and they'll be aware of the environment within the school as well. But I mean, one of the reasons that we changed the title of the policy to promote positive relationships within Falkirk's educational establishments was to not just in terms of how we respond to bullying behaviour, but as a sort of preventative measure to, if we create this environment where there is positive relationships within our educational establishments, then that will help to prevent bullying behaviour from occurring in the first place. So that's the sort of approach that we've taken.
In terms of actually what you were asking, in terms of if parents are unhappy with it, we've obviously got existing procedures within schools that parents can raise concerns with the head teacher in terms of existing processes. So if they were engaged in this process for whatever reason, were unhappy with the outcome related to their individual child, then we would deal with that in the way that we would deal with any concerns from parents there. And
that's what I was getting at. I just want to know about the formal process.
Yeah, so obviously they would have an opportunity to voice their opinion. If they were unhappy, then we'd obviously look to re-engage with them to make sure that we've got a mutually agreed resolution for that situation.
Is there an external appeal process then built into that? If somebody's not happy with an internal decision, where do they go next?
Obviously, in terms of we've got the right through our internal complaints procedure to obviously go to stage 2, which we would then be looking for other officers to independently review the complaint to ensure that the individual's complaint was taken seriously and that the actual response was in line with Falkirk Council's policies and procedures. And then beyond that, they can go to the SPSO if they're unhappy with that process as well to provide that external scrutiny on our internal mechanisms within the council.
Okay. Sorry. I just really wanted to make a comment that as a former QIO, trying to explain what restorative approaches were to parents was sometimes quite a complicated business. And I welcome this report because it's very much in plain English and accessible for everyone. So I think it should make the job an awful lot easier when parents read it to understand what's going on in the schools and where schools are coming from with the policies. So I welcome this. I think it's an excellent document.
Thank you for acknowledging it's in plain English. I think it's something that we continually strive to do, but it can be challenging when things are quite technical. Thank you for those comments. Councillor Murphy?
I would echo that, and I think that's a very welcome point. I remember myself sitting down as a parent to hear about restorative justice, and I think that the schools do a very good job in running programmes to try to help parents understand that. But naturally, as you do, if you come to a situation where you come in where your child is bullied or you have that fear, it's not necessarily at the forefront of your mind what is happening with the perpetrator of the bullying. And that's why having such a clear, consistent approach outlined from the beginning, and it's embedded right from the start of our education process in every establishment all the way through, to create that environment where parents understand the process, they understand that what's trying to be created is an environment which prevents bullying rather than one that punishes it once it occurs. And the way to reduce that, in common with other aspects where we're looking at saying if we can create an environment where those who understand the impact of their behaviour on others truly have that embedded, not in a kind of lip service way, but in a way that is part of the culture of our schools, and I think that will have the impact overall on the bullying which is within our schools. I echo Councillor McHugh's comments about the need for updated training and that constantly being under review on a regular basis, because I think one of the things that is quite well laid out is the impact that online bullying and other forms of technological bullying happens, and that changes very, very quickly. Probably by the time that we get out of this committee, something new comes out, and so that is something which I think needs to be acknowledged, needs to be constantly refreshed in order that we have policies which reflect the reality on the ground. So I absolutely welcome that focus within the report, and I think it will be welcomed by parents in terms of the clarity it's laid out, but also by teachers who will know that this is consistently being applied and reviewed across the board. So I think it's a really good report, well laid out, and absolutely very good positive comments to the service for doing so.
Michael?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to those who have put this together. I think it's very well put together, and the layout of it is easily understandable, so I want to commend you for doing that. I was also going to ask, as Councillor Nimmo did, if there were any records to date on how where we were with bullying and in relation to, is it escalating, decreasing, staying the same, and so we've already answered that question, that there are no current records. So I think the fact that there will be records in the future will enable us to monitor how well the policy is doing, the effectiveness of the policy. So I think it would be a good step forward if I've understood that correctly. And the final thing I would like to say is with our pupil representatives among us today, I wonder if there's anything they would like to contribute to this part of the discussion, because it's great to have them, and I think it'd be really good if they had anything to say on their own experiences of what they felt. Don't want to put them on the spot, but just done it.
I was glad that you did it because I did think about asking for their comments, but I thought they might not want to speak yet, but happy to hear what you have to have. Any thoughts on it?
I myself am lucky enough to not have never been a victim of bullying. However, I am aware that it is a problem for other people, so I'm very happy that there are now being actions that hopefully be successful to make sure that it will decrease, and hopefully soon maybe it won't be as an issue.
I think there's maybe a lack of understanding in Pakistan schools about what the school actually does to address bullying, and I think it's quite good that we have sort of a clear approach that everyone can understand and build on.
That's good. Thank you.
Just to pick up on Michael, in terms of what we're saying in terms of the consistency of reporting and recording, that's the case. We're looking to define that, but it's also schools do track and monitor instances within their school. But what the challenge is as a council, what they view as bullying, what they don't view as bullying, is there's inconsistencies potentially there. So when we actually then look to kind of collate and aggregate the data, there is a risk then that we lose the meaning then, because we're not necessarily comparing like with like. And obviously with the new policy and the new guidance then, we will get that consistency, so then we've got a clearer understanding where we then look at as a council, but also then as individual schools, about what their approach is and actually what the impact that is then having on their pupil population and instances of bullying. And obviously the outcome will be to reduce that, and also, as the report says, to have an increase in children and young people reporting that they feel safe in schools.
I've got Karen and I'll come to Councillor Alexander.
Just we've been talking about parental engagement, and I was wondering how this is going to be conveyed to parents, how we're going to bring parents into it. Will they just be given the policy to read, or just kind of how that discussion is going to take place? And in fact, if we're talking about teachers being trained, are any parent councils, or are there any spots for parent representatives to be part of that, or is it purely for teachers?
I think that's a very valid point. I think really what we don't want to do is just kind of push it out there and just hope that it lands in the right place. Really the next stage of the process would be for the team to be liaising with schools to support them and how that is disseminated across both the pupil and the parent communities within the schools, and then what supports the parent council may require. I've been out to a number of parent councils recently, engaging with a whole wide range of issues in terms of how better they could be supported by the centre, and being mindful of the fact that the parent council's primary focus is their local school and their local community and their children, but what supports can we give as officers to the schools? And this is probably a good example of an opportunity that we could support schools to share that message with their parents and the wider community as we go forward over the next 3 years.
I was going to ask the people reps for their views on this, so I'm going to put them on by the 8 ball again a wee bit more. I think we can't underestimate the role of I think we've an X factor here.
We've been trying to sort out the microphones, but I think we've all got a frog in our throat today, I think.
Something like that. I think that the role of senior pupils and prefects in particular within the secondary schools is crucial to even the prevention of bullying, and that's an area perhaps that we take a little bit more in detail of in terms of the type of guidance and training we give to senior pupils. There's no policing like local policing and internal policing and that, so it's an area we need to have a wee look at. Once, of course, we'll fix the PA system.
At the risk of bullying the whole committee, can we not just do without the microphones? Can you hear what I'm saying without a microphone? I'm not saying that I'm loud or anything, but I just think it would be easier. I don't know if it's annoying anybody else. But
Yes. Thank you. If we can avoid using the microphones and just maybe speak up a little bit, it'd be helpful. Because I think that the recording guys are having a wee bit of difficulty with the Dalek technology. Don't know whether Aaron or Alice want to make any comment about senior pupil roles in this?
Well, I know that in our school, when you become a prefect, if you are a duties prefect, you kind of have a small talk about if you see bullying around school, about how to make sure you separate people. However, we are advised if we see it to make sure the teachers deal with it, because it's just seen as a bit more, like they know more how to deal with it than us.
Yeah, I think it would be sort of important to think about how this is presented to people so they know how to act with this framework and bullying within the school setting.
And I think it's also important that the people who are given confidence to be able to feel they can report and speak to somebody. And I think that's something that comes through, and also about early identification, particularly teaching as well.
A number of our schools are already engaged in a programme which is really encouraging senior pupils in particular in terms of adopting the bystander approach. If you actually see something, then it's actually you're complicit if you actually do nothing, and it's actually then saying you need to do something, and whether as Alice has said, relating that to a teacher or a deputy or someone who can then intervene on that young person's behalf. It's important that that's conveyed, and I think there's an increasing awareness of observing the school environment, and if you see something that's not right and you're concerned about, please report it. It's your responsibility to do that, and schools are being involved in training their pupils in that approach, and that's been done very, very well, and it's having a real positive impact, not only in the reduction of these incidents, but also in the ethos within those schools as well.
Okay, thank you. On that, are we content to accept the report? Yeah. Thank you. Item 7, Framework Standards and Equality Report 2018. And it's David again.
It does, thank you. Thank you very much, Convener. This report provides Children's Services first standards and quality report that we are reporting under the National Improvement Framework. As members are aware, that we have a responsibility annually to publish a standards and quality report, and under the National Improvement Framework for Scotland, there's also a requirement now to make reference to the work that we're undertaking to deliver the National Improvement Framework. So this is our first report in the combined role. This report is for noting by the Education Executive, and it provides an overview of the activities that have been undertaken through the Schools and Education Division over the previous year. The legislative duties that we're reporting on is indicated in 3.2, and also that we have a responsibility to publish this report. The timing is quite challenging for us, and I know that I've had a number of conversations with colleagues and members about that the previous committee approved the plan, and now this committee has been asked to acknowledge the report, which is obviously out of sequence. The challenge for us within education is that schools have an annual planning and reporting cycle, which requires them to have information on what our intended plan is for the coming year by May. So this May we provide a very high level message to schools to enable them to plan for this session. Schools then produce their standards and quality reports, which we then receive during towards the end of June and into July as the schools break up for the summer. My officers then work with those particular reports and with the various national documents to then ensure that we've got the report we've got today. So the planning cycle is quite challenging for us. Despite that, however, we're probably one of the first councils to bring the report to committee for this year. Most of my other councils tend to bring the report in January and February committee cycles, which is obviously quite far off the pace. So we are really trying to seek to ensure that we are as close to the publication of our plan as possible when we are providing this report. We're obviously seeking approval from the Education Executive to publish this report onto the various media in terms of the Falkirk Council website and the various school websites that the parents may access the report. Again, it's focusing on the kind of key drivers through the National Improvement Framework in terms of raising attainment for every child within Falkirk Council, improving positive destinations, and also seeking to ensure that we have positive impact on literacy and numeracy for all our children and young people. As I said, the report is appended as Appendix 1, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hugh.
I'm happy to move this report and thank you to everyone that's participated in it. The report is very lengthy, and as Councillor Nicholson mentioned earlier about a lot of wording and different things, but I recognise that there is a lot of information that needs to get out to parents, and although we want to avoid putting out reports that are very lengthy to the point where possible interest is lost before we get to the end of it, it's very important for us to publish this and allow parents to see the extent of what is going on within their schools. As you can see, as you go through the report, there is masses of work going on, and to collate all that work into one document has been a big feast. So thank you, thanks for all the input that you've put in.
I think, as Councillor McHugh said, it is quite a working document, but it's important that the overall plan is actually able to be shared with parents. But we hope that once the updates are brought forward, as we go forward, they will be a wee bit more user-friendly and perhaps a wee bit more indicative with the charts and pictorial, making it much easier for parents to then actually understand. But I think it's important to have all the information to begin with, and I think that's what the crackling was. We couldn't hear terribly well. If we can just try and project our voices, I think it would be helpful. Okay, I think I had, was it Fiona was first?
I'll turn that off so that you can actually hear me and I'm not quite so crackly. Mine was actually really two things. One was a question. Appendix 1, is that in relation to SNSA or is it in relation to Teacher Judgment Survey? Sorry, I was relating it back to what was on page 5.
So in terms of the Appendix 1, that's relation to Teacher Judgment.
It's Teacher Judgment, it's not SNSA? No, sorry, I maybe misunderstood. I just thought I would check.
No, and again, obviously, the Standardised National Assessment is purely to inform the teacher's judgment, and from their point of view, that data in itself is for the teacher to consider in the wider context of the individual child's learning journey. So the data we are presenting here is purely the teacher judgment.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The second question I had was actually to do with, obviously at the moment, and this is more in light of what was said a couple of items ago, there's obviously been an increased number of hours used, staff, etc. I'm just a wee bit concerned about how that's going to play out in the next few years if we're then taking more money away, because I appreciate the fact that just now we're actually looking, we have an increased number of children in early years education, and if money is diverted into that, it's obviously coming from somewhere else. And looking at that educational experience for everybody, I just have a wee bit of concern how this is going to play out moving forward.
Obviously, in terms of the early years expansion, that's fully funded from Scottish Government, so that's really, in terms of the conversation we had earlier, that's not in scope for that piece of work, and obviously the focus is elsewhere for that. And if I can pick up another point, in terms of obviously the report itself, we were very mindful of the kind of layout of the report. And we feel that this is going to be an iterative process. We're going to have further discussions with parents in particular about the format of the report and accessibility of the report. We have sampled other councils' reports, and some of them currently are sitting at 60 pages of A4 text, which I just thought was just torture. And I thought, well, this particular education executive would lynch me if I gave you a 60-page report. We have plenty to populate that type of report. But as members had said earlier, we are looking at different graphical ways of representing the data to make it more quickly and more readily accessible. So I'm very mindful of the vast amount of activity that's been undertaken across all of our schools and communities, and it's trying to have that fairly represented in a strategic report. And we're obviously looking to build on that and learn from this particular experience, and obviously the talents that I do know that lie within our schools, and probably actually particularly with our children and young people in terms of their aptitudes and skills in relation to presenting graphical information. I think we've got an untapped source of support that we can maybe get to in future years, but the team are well aware of that, so obviously any comments that we have that would be welcome, and I can take that off table. Thank you.
David, I heard what you said about things being out of sequence slightly during your first part of your talk there. If you look at the recommendations, okay, we're just being asked to note and for Robert to make sure that the report's published on the council website, but if you look at 1.1, it's actually asking for approval for this to be submitted to the Education Scotland. Now, should that not form part of the recommendation?
Can I actually say that's actually an error, because actually we don't have to formally submit this to Education Scotland. I'll make that report. I appreciate you highlighting that, Councillor. No, we don't actually have to formally submit this to Education Scotland. We took subsequent advice to that, so this report is actually for our communities and Falkirk Council. It will be available on our website, and obviously if Education Scotland so wish, they can access that and view the report, but there's not a requirement on us to actually formally submit that to them. There's a requirement for us to submit the plan to them, not the actual report.
I mean, that's okay, that's clear as well.
Okay, Councillor Murtagh.
I welcome the report also, and acknowledge that I think it's the first time that it's been brought, and very much I echo Ms Mackay's assessment of the excellent skills that we have within our schools in terms of presenting, which I see before me on a daily basis, and being very impressed when they go out the door, probably beyond my skills as well. But I think that it is well laid out from the point of view that there are challenges in terms of the timing of it. I think it's an accessible document, and it should be put out, I think, to the widest possible audience in order that it can be properly viewed and being transparent. But I think that as a work in progress, it's a good document to get started on this, and definitely makes it interesting reading. So I'm not sure if it was formally seconded by Councillor Meiklejohn, but if not, I'm happy to do so, and look forward to future reports in the next years.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishes to comment? Okay, can we accept the report? Thank you. Our standard report on the Education Executive Item 8, 2020 Expansion Plan Update. Gary?
Thanks very much. It may be a standard report to bring to you, but each report offers an exemplary summary of the work that's been going on through the early years sector and even school estate overall, I have to say. The purpose of the report is in section 1, which the report finds today. Confirms the year 1 projects that have been delivered. That provides an update on infrastructure and expansion timeframes and our plans for year 2. It provides some other additional information relative to the properties that through the strategic property review have come into our horizons for consideration, and it gives a number of other general updates and associated work streams with early years. The 4 recommendations before the Executive today: 1, to note the successful delivery of the year 1 projects on time, as outlined in section 4.1. Note the plans to review and reassess the delivery timeframes for year 2 projects. Agree the Director of Children's Services can progress consultation required with parents, other stakeholders on the plans to consider the wider use of other properties that are now being considered. And to request the Director of Children's Services provides another and regular ongoing report as we provide regular updates to the Executive as things do change as we go through this very challenging process. Looking at the background, success stories here. 10 projects successfully delivered on time at the start of this year. 506 young people are now in 1140 hours of education. 57 additional frontline staff have been recruited. The attention that we now face, that's the success in one. We'll learn from it. We've got to learn from it as officers. And at the moment, we are now focusing on what we do for our year 2 and plans beyond. As agreed at the executive on the 14th of August in section 3.2, the whole project, I've always said, it's iterative, it's dynamic. As part of the strategic reporting review, a report was taken to the executive, and it asked us to consider the wider use of 2 properties that are going to become vacant in the not too distant future. The properties are the Stenhouse Social Work Office and the Kinglass Social Work Office in Bowness. Section 3.3, in addition to that, fairly recently, as members may know, there was a former private nursery located in Calner Business Park, which it was called Babes in the Wood. It closed a number of years ago. It was linked to the Department of Work and Pensions. That nursery is council owned. It's part of the council rental portfolio. So it's only right that, given the council now owns that property, it's available for rent, and we consider it as part of our wider plans. So that's the 3 new dimensions that we're bringing to the table, which we weren't aware of up until about a month or so ago. Section 4 looks at the considerations. Section 4.1 confirms the 10 projects that are now fully delivered and operational. You'll see there that the members may recall that we'd asked the plans to do 8 over the course of the summer. We took licence of the opportunity to accelerate the provision of outdoor shelters and 2 other provisions, Mayor and Means and White Cross, to enable them to deliver 1140 hours immediately as well. And as we go through the project, we will maintain that where resources allow, if we can accelerate the programme, we will do that, and that's an example of good practice in doing it. So we plan to do 8 and we've delivered on 10. Ultimately, extra young people are benefiting from early learning and childcare education. In section 4.2, as I said, we've reflected on what's happened at year 1 and tried to bring them into year 2. Year 2 there's a significant increase in the number of projects we're up to deliver in year 2. It's only right that we've tried to phase them in a pragmatic way. Rather than try to deliver everything big bang in August, that might not necessarily work with the resources, the recruitment and all the checks we've got to do. So I think it's pragmatic that we reflect on that, and when we next bring the report to the Education Exec, we'll bring forward not a reduction in the number of projects, we'll bring forward a slightly more phased implementation programme. And again, some of the phasing may also mean accelerated projects as well. And we'll be doing that as we reflect on the resources that we've actually got. As I mentioned earlier on, section 4.3 looks at, in order to fully assess the potential and suitability of other projects that were mentioned earlier on, we are asking permission to go out to consult with parents and stakeholders in terms of the 3 properties. Looking at the Stenhouse Social Work Office, we're looking to go out and consult on the option to amalgamate and consolidate existing provision at Lambert Day and Inchlear on site at the Stenhouse Social Work Office. From an officer's point of view, the main thing here is that in doing this consultation, you've got to be happy that any outcomes are at least as good, or if not better, than what we've got just now. And the best value argument is absolutely concrete and deliverable on it. That's the 2 key things to it: best value and improved outcomes. And if we can do that, we'll bring the report back with the recommendations. The second thing is the Kinglass Social Work Office in Bowness. Given its location, we've always said that to minimise the amount of bricks and mortar we're building, if we can, we've got to sweat our own assets. And this is a good example of us looking at the Kinglass Social Work Office to see if we can use the office that we save as bricks and mortar extensions. In the case in particular, this has got a direct impact on the plans to extend Keele Primary School for early years. So given its close proximity, as officers we would consider if we can make the provision using the Kinglass Social Work Office, and we're asking permission to go and consult on that. The third one is the nursery at the Calner Business Park. For those of you who don't know it, this is a a nursery that's in absolute very good condition. The council will get dilapidation monies to reinvest in the property as part of the buyout of the lease that was on the property. It's run by the council's asset management people, and we've been able to look at it. It is in absolute tip-top condition. Also, more importantly, its location is close to Callender Woods, and it offers an ideal chance for us to consider outdoor learning experiences for young people. Very much in the forefront of the government's agenda is outdoor experiences, and this is it's virtually 30 yards from the Callender Woods. We couldn't have picked a better site if we tried. So quite rightly, we need to look at it to see if it offers better value and better outcomes and better deliverables for the project overall. The impact it would have is consideration would be look at the Queen Street Nursery provision just now, Woodburn Nursery and the Victoria Primary School, along with the nearby Lawson Primary School. So we'd be looking at the configurations of some of the existing plans to see if they could be bettered by bringing that council-owned nursery into education provision portfolio. So that's what we'll be looking at. The Scottish Government have relaxed the way we undertake statutory consultation. The consultation that we intended to do in this case would be with the parents and the parent councils, the staff and the local elected members would be kept informed of things as well. Section 4.4, another success story. As part of our arrangements with the Scottish Childminding Association, or the SCMA, 19 local childminders have applied to become partner childminders and they've been accepted. Already we have 5 children now receiving part of their 1140 hours in a blended approach between some of our own provision and in childminders, giving parents flexibility and giving them additional choice. We're already working with SCMA on the next stage, linked to our Year 2 expansion programmes, to see what childminders are available in those particular areas. So watch this space. It's something that will evolve as the whole project moves forward. Section 4.5, I have to say that this recruitment's proved a major success and has been able to deliver some of the things that we've done on time. We've recruited an extra support worker officer to support Karen's team, the very small team that she's got, to look mainly at the recruitment, all the ancillary checks that go with recruitment, to set up all the interview processes, etc., and also to help track some of the revenue and capital spend that we've got. Again, we need it, and again, it's provided within the budget that was reported previously to the exec. That's the last central appointment. We've got our team is now up to speed. Section 5 looks at the consultation. What's critical, I said earlier on, in terms of any consultation, we've got to make sure that we do an assessment of best value and improve for better outcomes. That's going through all that. So our duty is to look at all the property options I mentioned before, and we'll undertake a consultation between November and January, and we'll report back to the Education Exec as soon as we can on the outcomes of those consultations to see how we could utilise or consider the use of the 3 properties that I mentioned before. Section 6 looks at the implications. Financial and resources implications. Thus far, the current year's budget is on track. In the January report, I will put some flesh on the bones here. We'll be focusing quite a lot on just getting things delivered. So we need to just make sure that the ledger structured to report back. So in January, you'll see proof that our spend is on budget. Just a bit of good news as well. Yesterday, the Scottish Government announced, those of you who may recall, this is your homework, that there was a £6 million unallocated amount that the government were holding previously. They've now allocated the £6 million out. It's intended primarily for the additional graduate recruitment, and Falkirk's share of it is just under £179,000, and that's part of our 18-19 monies. So when I bring a report to you in January, those figures will be factored into the totality of the resources we've got. So again, Falkirk's now been allocated their share of the £6 million, which was the bit of money the government had held off till they grappled with the numbers of the graduates that come into the areas, and we've now got just under 179,000 of additional money in 18-19. So again, I'll feature it, and it only came in yesterday, so it wasn't in time to update this paper. But again, it's good news for the project, and the council and Falkirk overall. The legal processes haven't changed since the last report. It's standard that we're following the statutory guidance in section 6.2. Not surprising, there's 3 risks always identified with any major infrastructure plans. They're outlined in section 6.3. We continue, and we will do, to target deprivation where we possibly can as a forefront for our prioritised investment and prioritised accelerated programmes. That will always be in the forefront of anything that we're trying to do. There's no sustainable environmental impact to report back on. The conclusions are there that year 2 is the focus out of attention now, along with undertaking the consultations if it's approved by the executive today. It's important we do learn from year 1. Yes, it's been a success, but ultimately there are things we could challenge ourselves to do better and to get better outcomes. That's just what education and lifelong learning is all about. We'll practice it within the teams, and we'll come with a phased plan for year 2 in due course. It's also important, very important, that we tie in with the key work the Council Strategic Property Review is doing. They're reviewing a number of properties that the Council create to downsize the assets and change the way that they deliver services and what offices they deliver services from. So maybe other properties will come into our project to be considered. It's absolutely right that happens, and we consider it fresh and independently to make sure we get best outcomes. That's the report. Karen's here as well, and between us we'll do our best to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Jason McKay.
Happy to move that report. Our progress continues. Every success that we have. I've been out and about in our community visiting some of our new establishments, and staff, children, parents alike are all welcoming the development. I think it's a fantastic progress for the staff that work within early years, that have done a lot of hard work over the years and are now getting the recognition that education starts at the very youngest of our children, and we're putting in place the best possible centres that we can, and services, flexible services that we can. I'd like to thank Gary for his work, and Karen obviously on the interaction with the Child Minders Association. That's great that that's on board, and it's given far more opportunity and choice for our families and parents, and also employment in our communities. Really appreciate that work. Hopefully I'll get to meet the woman that's supporting that in the near future. Going forward, yep, it's right that you look and look. You took on a big project. Delivering the 10 projects is fantastic, and recognising that we can't keep up that level of speed at all times, and putting a more pragmatic step-by-step approach in will help support your team, and allow you to burn out before the whole project is developed. So I appreciate that, and I'm happy to move this report.
Thank you. I think we have to commend the work that was done in delivering the 10 projects in the short space of time that we had with regards to the funding, and taking a more pragmatic approach, I think, is the right way to go, as you said, and I'm happy to second the report on that. Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Convener. I'm not going to make a big speech, but as a mum and grandmother, obviously early learning and early development for children does have the biggest impact on their later life and education. It was just a simple question, Gary. The calendar partners, they understand that it is obviously a very good facility, and it's in the right place for the woods. Is it in the right place for people to walk there with their children? What's the catchment area? Has any work been done on that?
Again, it's right, look at it, that's the whole point of the last meeting.
Stop using the microphone, Gary. Sorry, please.
I will raise my voice. I sound like a head teacher. I'm just
feeling well in my bit. Sorry.
The whole point is that if it's agreed today, that's one of the things we will look at as part of the consultation. But we can't preempt what we do things, but certainly it's in a good location. It is accessible, both in terms of walking and also for vehicular access as well in the location it's at.
Okay. Well, it's just before we spend money on it, as I say, I think it is a good facility and it is in a good place for access to the outdoors. But
accessibility,
to be inclusive, we need to be aware that not everybody does have a car.
absolutely, accessibility and proximity to other schools, etc., are one of the things that we would consider as part of the consultation. We can't preempt what the consultation will find because we've not started it yet, we've not got permission to do it yet, but that's one of the things we'll certainly feature in the report that comes back.
My question is on the consultation, how do you plan to consult with parents?
What we'll do is we'll contact the parents that are using our existing facilities in the areas that we've mentioned, and later on this, probably a questionnaire we would tend to do, and also we'll have a meeting with them all locally to discuss what the plans are and assess their views on various things. Accessibility might be one that would come up in
Do you have a plan to widen that? I'm thinking that if parents are already in a nursery, might be loath to make a change, but obviously potentially this would affect children coming up to nursery who have not yet engaged in this process, so how do we reach them?
Again, it's one thing we do have applications on file for those parents that have applied in advance. Again, it's difficult to know where the parents are if they've not contacted us, so it's one of the things we'll wrestle with as we go through it. Well, certainly we'll try to involve as many local people that have a local interest in the vested properties as we possibly can. That's what we try to do.
It might be probably thought like health visitors,
yes.
You know, like, and that those kind of services.
So everything, your successor's failure is based on the big C word, that's communication. We've got to get it right, and we've learned from past mistakes, and we've learned from past successes, so we'll look at that and take it forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Ms. Alexander?
Yeah, Convener, the three words you're barely finding in the same sentence, that's Gary Greenhorn in summary.
Brilliant.
I know I was a mistake. We'll put it back at it.
The guy knows I'm only serious.
We know that.
The report itself, I just have a quick question with regards to the recruitment. How's the recruitment been going? Has the department incurred any problems with recruitment and professional staff?
Not really, no. The main aspect over the summer holidays was time, and we're a much better place this year to advertise that bit earlier. We didn't really kick in the recruitment until after Education Exec on the 10th of April last year, so timing was a little bit of an issue. By the time it gets approved, the HR goes out on My Job Scotland, it has to be live for 2 weeks, and then the time that PDG and disclosures take, that was our most limiting barrier this year. Certainly we had a really, really good response from all the adverts. There was over 200 applications for the early learning and childcare assistant posts. There was only 22 posts, but we're getting a huge amount of interest in those posts. Probably because of the hours that we offer them, and it suits young, working families that don't have before and after childcare. That's an 11 till 2 shift to help over the lunchtime period. Certainly our recruitment for early years officers and senior early years officers, I've been quite pleased with the response that we've been getting there. We are getting people coming from out with other authorities as well as people in our own authority looking for promoted posts as well.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McHugh, you want to come back?
Just to ask Gary, the 179,000 is for recruiting our heavy bongs. Make me explain that to them. Our graduates. Yeah, so that will be purely for that. Yeah.
It can be used for a number of things, but primarily it was held back till the government worked out the total number that was there in Scotland. So some councils, the extra money will more than cover it, so it can be used for a range of things within the project. So it's quite clear to say it's primarily used to fund the additional graduate pedagogue recruitment, but if it's more than you need, then you can use it elsewhere within the early years project. So that's what it says. So I will build into the January paper to confirm.
And just to pick up on Councillor Coon's comment about transport, at the moment we have children walking from Woodburn Nursery to Calderwoods at least twice a week. So this is kids for 2 years old that have a safe crossing from Woodburn Nursery right into Calderwoods. So obviously there is a safe way of getting there. And they love it, and so do their parents.
Okay, Councillor Murtagh.
I'd just like to comment on the progress made in terms of the child minding engagement and the news of that it's encouraged other childminders to apply to the SEMA. I think that's really welcome. I know that there had been concerns raised by childminders in terms of what their role was in this, and that they do have a role in delivery, and particularly where we have different settings across different wards and rural locations, and how that's working. So it's really good to see that engagement has happened. It's been positive and well received. Because I know there were some concerns, so it's great to see that that's been part of it, and that continues to figure in that ward delivery plan where we'll have that flexibility within the wards in terms of the different models and the provision. So really pleased to see that progress.
Councillor Murtagh, that's a good example of where members can feed up some of the concerns that we don't necessarily hear ourselves in terms of childminders being feeling disengaged. We take those comments on, and now we've got a positive outcome. So it's thanks to Teaching and Learning for feeding these things up to us.
I have to say the development officer within the SCMA that has been assigned to working with our local authority has been fantastic, and is a very good sort of go-between between the voice of the childminders and the local authority. And we're really keen to scale that up as we move forward.
I think, Gary, that word, that communication word, it shows actually that has been, this is a new process, and as I say, when year one, we're into year two, there's a lot we can learn, but communicating that how we've overcome certain aspects and responded to it, it's really key to say we are learning as we go in this. All local authorities are dealing with the same things, so getting that out and getting that message back out is important too to others, so we're doing that too.
Okay, thank you. If everybody is now finished, can we approve the report? Okay. Okay, our final lease agreement for the Ashton Church changing rooms at Dawson campus.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll try to summarise the report. Unfortunately, Mark Meekin was going to do this report. He's been otherwise detained, so he can't make it, so from Scotland, but I'll try to summarise it. The purpose of the report is to seek approval to lease the AstroTurf and changing rooms to the Dawson Sports Development Association, the DSDA. The location of it is attached on Appendix 1. Key recommendations for the exec today is to agree the lease. It's a 15-year lease, and it's to full repair and insurance terms at £1 per annum. To note that the proposals are compliant with the Council's statutory obligations in respect of disposing of land, where we dispose of land at less than market or best price, and agree that the Director of Children's Services and the Director of Development Services conclude and progress the terms of the lease transaction. Section 3 looks at the background information. DSDA is an incorporated charitable organisation. Those that may know it, they do a lot of valuable work down in that particular area. Section 3.2, this isn't a formal request for a community asset transfer or a tax transfer. It's a request for a lease, and because the request for a lease is at £1, it's below the market rent. As officers, we've got to satisfy ourselves that certain conditions have been met, and there's a legal requirement to that, and the legal requirement is under the Disposal of Land by Local Authorities Scotland regs, as detailed in section 5.2. Section 4 looks at the proposal. The DSDA, the company use the property by informal means. They're looking to maximise community benefits. One of the critical things here is if they got the lease for a long period, 15 years is the request, that's a long period, it satisfies attracting £65,000 of external funding they already have in the bag to invest in the asset, to improve the asset, and it will improve the social, recreational and physical activities in the area, as well as add economic benefits to that particular area. The DSD prepare a business plan. They've been given independent support from Falkirk CVS, and we're very grateful for the support they've given. And our own CLD service have been instrumental in supporting the group with the business plan. The considerations are laid out in section 5. The normal rent relative to a property of that size from our colleagues in the asset team is around about £1,500. So where we are agreeing to a transaction below that, we've got to satisfy ourselves that certain conditions are met. The conditions we've got to satisfy ourselves are laid out in section 5.2, and we've got to look at the likely contribution in whole or in part just against each of the 4 key targets that are in there. Section 5.3 says that we've already had a full assessment of the application, and it's been looked at from a range of officers from a range of services across the country. The assessment carried out by the Corporate Asset Transfer Working Group concluded there was 7 positive contributions that were identified from it. The 7 contributions are laid out in section 5.4. Based on those 7 positive contributions, the team itself considered that we had met the requirements to dispose of a property at less than market rate, because they were more than well satisfied that the aspects of the Act were met. Accordingly, in 5.6, they've asked to progress the lease at the nominal rate of £1 per annum for a 15-year period. The financial implications to the Council is that the Council would ordinarily expect to get about £1,700 of income from a property of that during the year. We would forego that as part of this deal, and that's why it's been reported today. The foregoing it is that there's wider economic benefits, and also transfers to the community the right to manage the asset, and with that the right to probably attract other external investment in it that we as a council could not ordinarily do. The bit that's missing from it is that it's hard to quantify, is that it would save us also the repairs and maintenance that we would do on an asset like that going forward. So lots of loss of income, the council would no longer need to repair it, because part of the lease is a repair and insurance lease. So I'm happy to take any questions in terms of the paper before members today.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Alexander, is this part of your portfolio?
Yes. Yes, what was that, you Council?
Is this part of your portfolio area?
Yes, it is. Actually crosses a number of portfolios. Primarily it's my own. First of all, can I say that this is another good news report, and I thought it's been a very positive agenda, and grateful to the officers for the contribution to that this morning. The economic regeneration is more than just jobs, and it's more than just buildings. It's opportunities, and it's opportunities to participate in activities that will benefit the individual. This report itself is, I think, a good example of where the local authority have been working with the voluntary sector within their communities. And the Dawson area is still one of the areas that regretfully suffers above average poverty and antisocial problems. The projects such as this will help that particular change from what we have at the moment, what we've had in the past, to a brighter future for the community there. I'd like to thank Falkirk Football Foundation for their work in this, and there's been a tremendous support to the authority in this. You remember the work we undertook and produced the facility at Cumley Park. We're going to see a pattern develop in terms of the impact that this organisation can have on our community. And I've got here pause for any jokes about the current status of the club in their own park, but at the moment, but they're certainly delivering in other pitches in relation to what we've seen at the Cumley Park and at Crosson. Again, it encourages involvement by our young people in particular but not necessarily just the young people. The over 50s football teams have been formed and are participating in a wider structure, which is good. I'm not sure about the over 60s. I'm just waiting on that one. Coming back to the report, £1,700 is a very small amount for what we get back from this particular project and from others for similar nature elsewhere. So in terms of value for money, I think it's an excellent report, an excellent proposal, and it's an excellent partnership. And partnerships are going to become even more important and crucial to the local authority to seek to deliver our programme. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to move the recommendations contained within the report.
Thank you. Mr. Colley?
I have to second that. It's an excellent proposal.
Thank you. I do believe there has something called walking football now, that the older generation participate in. So I think that there's always opportunities if we did.
Well, the senior team have been practicing that recently. But the director and I have got fingers crossed for the future.
It's an excellent demonstration of partnership within the Dawson area, and moving this to a community partnership, a community organisation, and having the investment that's not or would not be seen as maybe a significant priority for local authority, being able to have that external funding certainly will improve the facility down there. It has been a well-used facility over the years, and I'm sure it will continue to go from strength to strength and continue to develop the health and well-being within the area, from the youngest children all the way up to the seniors. Any other member?
I just wanted to ask Gary, the VSDA, is that a separate group from the Two Park AFC, and what's the membership of it?
Can I come back to you on that one? I think it is definitely a separate group. I don't know what the membership is. If Mark was here, he'd probably write it off on the top of his head. I'll come back to you with details of that.
Okay, thank you.
I think from my memory, it's a combination of all the groups down here that have used the facility in the past that have come together with this particular.
It definitely is an amalgamation of all the groups that use it, both currently and those that have got future use of it. I just don't know the names of all the groups. I'm not that familiar with it.
Okay.
It's just to say that I hope that Falkirk Football Club won't be delivering on Opal View Park in a couple of weeks in the big derby match in the cup final, and I continue to practice walking football at that time. But I do know, I think it's a serious point. Obviously, the work that the Falkirk Foundation has been able to do is fantastic, and I do know the great pride I take in Stennismuir in being the first community interest club that was registered as such, and the work that we are doing. Just to mention, particularly poignant in this week, that one of our current projects is our Give Veterans a Ball project, which are looking for support, and votes are on Aviva at the moment, and that there are many groups within our communities which feel isolated and such struggle to engage and become part of that community, and projects like that and trying to reach out to promote positive physical and mental health in all groups in our community are very welcome. So I think this is an excellent example of departments and council working together, and there's many others out there, and let's hope there's the right result in a couple of weeks when we're all friends still afterwards. The result I'm waiting for.
Depends.
Okay, I think at that point I'll ask if there's anyone else that wishes to make comment on the report, or are we happy to accept? Thank you. We can now display the virtues of Falkirk Football Club after the meeting, and I don't know that maybe I'll be looking for new players, so
Virtues is the right description.
okay, thank you very much.